Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation about supernatural business. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So you've published a Bible study on YouVersion app talking about doing business in the supernatural.
Yeah.
What the heck does that mean? Why don't you share your story? Who are you and what does that mean?
Man, I got an engineering degree, an MBA, went to Ford Motor Company, had my own company for 5 years, sold it to a public firm. Then I started flipping houses, flipping lots, doing subdivision, building houses, and then I ended up in commercial real estate for the last decade plus. But for most of that time, Josh, I had a problem, a big problem. And it was right here for those watching. It was right here between my ears. And that problem was I thought that there was a separate realm of, like, there's God stuff and there's Sunday stuff. And then there's, work stuff. And, I would pray about people, loving Jesus or, getting through their marriage problems or whatever problems they had. But I was really reluctant to pray about work because, after all, that was filthy lucre. It was, making money. That wasn't God's thing. But you know what? I kind of knew that was wrong, but I had a really hard time getting past that. Well, finally, I just realized, I actually got some great teaching about the last 7 years, and I've realized God cares about everything. He doesn't care about just what's inside the 4 church walls or what's going on in this mission program or whatever. And I also learned that we, as business people, real estate investors, business people, we have more opportunities to impact the world than most any pastor or missionary ever dreams of. And so I'm excited to try to follow Jesus and see him supernaturally work in every area of my life, including business. And I don't know if we have time, but I could tell you some stories if you want. We could probably talk a long time about some of these stories, but I've seen God work, and I've got stories that are just incredible, encouraging.
So I do want to hear those stories. Before we do those stories, tell us what you're up to now. Tell us about Wellings Capital and what you guys do there.
Yeah, Wellings Capital, for years I was involved in residential real estate, and I kind of had a sense that the wealthiest people in the world use commercial real estate to protect and grow their wealth. But I didn't know how to get in. Syndication wasn't really famous at the time. And, this is early 2000s. And there was just, where was the on-ramp? Wellings Capital exists because we don't think it should be this hard. We're actually giving regular investors an opportunity to get into deals that they wouldn't otherwise get access to. We're trying to take down the barriers to entry for investors, and we're giving them diversification across a portfolio of recession-resistant assets. For example, our 4th of our 5 funds had about 188, I think, total assets in it. These were self-storage, mobile home parks, an apartment, industrial project, et cetera, that gives, in giving investors access to a variety of asset types, geographies, operators, and deals.
Recession-proof.
Resistant. I'm quick to say.
What's the difference?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything recession-proof except, what we lay aside in heaven. Jesus said, where moth and rust don't destroy. I take that to mean, where there's no chance of that being harmed. But I don't think there's anything that's recession-proof on earth. I mean, who would have expected COVID? Who would have expected something completely out of left field that dropped the stock market 33.4% in 23 days? Who would have expected things like that?
Yeah. So recession resistant, right?
Yeah.
Is some of the areas. Now, you said industrial real estate, multifamily, mobile home parks, self-storage, right?
Yeah.
Are those some of the ones that you talk about?
Yeah, and I don't think those are all completely recession resistant, but the way we're trying to invest in them, they should be. I mean, if you want to dive into a little detail here, there's this thing called the debt service coverage ratio, and that's simply the ratio between the net operating income of a property and the amount of mortgage payment that an operator makes in a given month. Well, bankers like to see 1.25, 1.3, which is a 25 or 30% margin of safety if occupancy goes down, if delinquency goes up, if there's an eviction moratorium, or just rents go down. 25 to 30% margin of safety. Well, we like to see assets that we believe have incredible intrinsic value. Warren Buffett, Howard Marks, Charlie Munger, they would call this value investing, finding value that's hidden or unseen to the public eye, like somebody who invested, like Warren Buffett. He invested in Apple, even though he didn't like tech stocks, when he could see this incredible trend that would make Apple skyrocket later. So not that long ago, he invested in Apple in the wake of Steve Jobs' death. And man, just incredible growth there. Well, we see the same thing in real estate. For example, simple example. We're going into a self-storage facility, and the owner, and these are all real examples. The owner says, yeah, my wife got pregnant and we've owned it for 6 years. We decided to sell it. Your wife got pregnant? What? Oh yeah, she runs it out of her home, well, out of the basement, and I said, how often do you raise rents? There's a lot of inflation lately. This was a few weeks ago. And he said, oh, we bought it 6 years ago. We've never raised rents. We got 100% occupancy. I'm like, okay. And then another thing, an operator and that person even said was, yeah, there's like 10 extra acres with the property we're not using. There's 10 extra acres. But that, and I'm talking to you now, Josh, and the audience, there's an incredible demand for boat and RV storage now. So somebody who has in the self-storage business already, who has 10 extra acres, might be able to gravel or pave some of that, or incrementally do so, and significantly increase their income. That person might be able to put U-Hauls out front and get commission from U-Haul of a couple $1,000s a month. $3,000 a month in U-Haul commission translates to about $600,000 in asset value. The paving or graveling and putting out boat and RV storage, putting an ATM out front, putting in a showroom that sells locks, boxes, tape, and scissors, charging late fees, raising rent to the market level, all kinds of ways to raise revenue. When you do that and you keep costs approximately constant, raising revenue provides a tremendous margin of safety, maybe a debt service coverage ratio of 1.8 or 2.5 or even 3.0. Well, we see this all the time. Well, what that does is it provides recession resistance, meaning if things go south during a recession, not only does the asset thrive, and I can tell you why that could be true later, but these type of assets have a large margin of safety in case things go south. And that's the kind of assets we love to invest in.
So how do things thrive in a recession or when things go south for a little bit?
Yeah. So mobile home parks, for example, in 2008, I've got this graph I could show you that has all these lines, that all take this big dip around 2008-9, and then they go back up. Mobile home parks had no dip at all. They just continued to rise because there's a huge housing, there's an affordable housing crisis right now, and there has been for years. 10,000 people turn 65 every day, but 6 in 10 of them don't have $10,000 saved for retirement. But a lot of them have equity in their homes, and they're willing to trade that equity in sometimes for a mobile home park lifestyle. And so mobile home parks, that's the only asset type we know, Josh, that has a decreasing supply and an increasing demand every year. And it's not going away. It's not going to change. And so that's the type of asset that we consider quite recession resistant. Now, nobody expected COVID, like I said, but self-storage has been the #1 booming asset in the commercial real estate realm since COVID. Some quick reasons are people are relocating, people are downsizing, people are putting they're closing down bars, restaurants, and office buildings, and they're putting their stuff in storage. And those are some of the things that are driving this huge boom in self-storage right now. It's kind of funny. We talk about doing business supernaturally. I wrote a book on self-storage in 2019, and the publisher, because of COVID and some other things, held it up. It just came out. And it came out right on the heels of, Wall Street Journal and New York Times and other publications saying self-storage is the big winner from COVID. And so there's a huge demand right now to learn more about this.
Yeah. So this is interesting, right? But you started actually with your own business, and then you got into real estate investing, and then you got into raising money, right? You're on the fourth of 5 funds or the fifth of 5 funds?
Yeah, we're on the fund number 5 right now, and April 1st we'll be launching a much larger evergreen fund that we plan to be working on for decades to come.
Let's go back to when you did your first fund, and you're raising money to find opportunities and invest in opportunities for other people, right? So you're
Yeah.
raising a fund. Let's go back to hanging out with Paul then,
Okay.
and have a conversation about raising capital. What advice would you give yourself? You're about to do you're an emerging fund manager, about to do your first fund. What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, so I wrote a book in 2016 called The Perfect Investment. It was about apartment investing. And I came to the conclusion after years of banging my head up against a wall that the perfect investment was not perfect at all if you had to overpay to get it. And we weren't finding apartment deals. So we decided to expand out into self-storage, mobile home parks, and they had all this upside buying from mom and pop operators that we didn't see in apartments. And I just told you a lot of that a minute ago. Well, I kept believing that we were going to get this big check from China. Like I was closing my eyes saying, okay, we're gonna find this huge investor. And I had a couple friends in China. This wasn't just a wish. I mean, they were saying, yeah, we got investors here left and right waiting to invest. And so every time I had a deal that I almost was ready to put an offer on, I'd say, hey, do you have money? You have the money ready? Not right now. And so my mentor, after 2 or 3 years of hammering me to develop a capital raising system, he, on a call with other people on the call, he said, Paul Moore, don't call me again. And this is my mentor who I had paid a lot of money to. Don't call me again until you take my advice you've been ignoring for 2 years.
Wow.
Ouch. Well, about that time, talk about God's intervention. Literally, I think that week, I discovered this little purple app on my iPhone called the podcast app. I knew about podcasts, but I'd never used that app. I clicked on it. I ended up on Richard T. Wilson's capital raising, family office club. And I clicked on one about raising capital, and he told this story. And I think it was the second step in my life change here after my mentor's smackdown. The story was, if you want to live up north and you really want to live on salmon, you have 2 choices. First of all, you can be a spear fisherman. You can go out and, let's say you're out in the wilderness, you can cut the spear and you can hone it and you can learn to throw it, and you can hope that a salmon swims by in these dark waters, and you can hope that you get it, and you can hope that you can get it to shore after you spear it, and you might have some fish. Good job. But this is where the analogy gets silly. The other option is you can be a grizzly bear standing in the waterfall, letting the salmon jump into your mouth. And that's what you need to do when you raise capital. And so I'm saying, wait, Richard, what? How do I be the grizzly bear? And so I actually got to know him a little bit and found out, being the grizzly bear means creating a lot of meaningful educational content. Mm-hmm. Creating content for me looked like writing 3 books on real estate investing. It looked like having a podcast, being a guest on other people's podcasts, creating videos for Bigger Pockets, writing over 100 blog posts for Bigger Pockets, speaking at live events. These are the type of things I've done to create educational content. We've never done a sales push. Even though I know how to advertise on Facebook and Google, we've never done that. We have investors coming to us asking to invest as a result of this grizzly bear and the waterfall strategy.
Yeah. So I know Richard Wilson, no relation to me, but we went to visit him in his group, and he is a smart guy. He cornered the industry in family office investing, and right. He's moving up the incredible ladder in terms of the groups that he's working with. He's
Yeah.
an incredible marketer, incredibly smart investor. So
Yeah.
um so as you were doing this, you found this podcast and you listened to it, then you implemented it, right? So you called back your mentor and you said, okay, I'm ready to raise the fund. What the heck did that look like?
Yeah. So actually, we were so excited when we realized that the value add opportunities in self storage and mobile home parks exceeded anything we had seen in apartments for years and years. We had actually done a multifamily property in 2011 in the Bakken in North Dakota. Then we did another one. That's the oil region with the oil boom. And then we did another one next door. Then we did a Hyatt hotel. And so I knew something about multifamily, something about hotels, but I had never seen any upside like we were seeing in self-storage and mobile home parks. But I had to face the fact I had about 120 investors at that time. And I had to face the fact that we love these new asset classes, new to us, but we didn't have a team. We didn't have a track record. We didn't have the technology. We didn't have anything except a plan to go out and buy these assets. So we looked at some and we just got this horrible feeling like, would I invest with Wellings Capital, knowing everything I know that we'd never done a self-storage deal or mobile home park? No. Well, we just felt like it wasn't right. So we went to a bunch of our investors and said, look, we think this is the way to go. We can point you to some of these investments, or we can be your due diligence partner and go out and look for these investments. We can carefully vet the operators, carefully vet the deals, carefully put together a strategy to invest. We say no almost all the time. We'd already been on that track for a long time. And we can put these deals together into a portfolio. We'll call it a fund, and we'll give you diversification across asset types, geographies, operators, strategies, and deals. And that's what we did. We came up with that idea ourselves, and we actually put together 2 funds in 2019, and here we are at the end of 2021 on our 5th fund.
What size funds were they? Give us an idea of.
Well, so the first one was the Wellings Income Fund 1, and it was about a $13 million fund. So we put in $13 million in equity, and we acquired interests in, let's say, about 30 million in assets. So, little, 55, 60% debt to debt ratio on those, if you will. The other fund was a growth fund, and we don't consider that a failure, but here's what happened. Warren Buffett said the best investors, the smartest people in the world, say no a lot. The very best investors say no almost all the time. Well, once we started the growth fund, we realized we were saying no almost all the time to these ground up developments and these steep value adds that had no income and wouldn't have income for years, maybe. Well, we were saying no all year in 2019, and we only put 2 assets in that fund. And it totaled about $2 or $3 million in equity. And we were happy with the assets we had. Then 2020 hit, and we said, well, we'll do 1 more year of this, try to add 2 more assets, and then we'll wrap it up. Well, then COVID hit, adding this huge level of uncertainty. And you got to remember, it's easy to see back in a rear view mirror now. Oh, we could have done self-storage and it'd been great. But at the time, it was scary. We didn't know what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so we just decided we're not going to do any more assets in this growth fund. Another factor for that was how well the income fund was performing. The assets in the income fund were growing at a phenomenal rate, much higher than even the assets in the growth fund. The appreciation was growing. We just thought, why don't we just make this a growth and income fund, and we'll keep it with that. So we launched Income Fund 2 with 30 million in equity, and then we've done 2 more since then.
In total, if you had a guess from when you sold your business and got your start in real estate, how much money do you think you've raised?
If I count the 2010, the Hyatt hotel and the 2 assets at that time, probably right at about 80 million. We've done 70 plus million in these Wellings income, these Wellings assets recently.
Yeah. Describe a time when someone said no to you, right? You went to an investor, you did a pitch, they said no, and they had a really good reason. and that reason caused you to do a big pivot in your life or business?
Well, you know what? I think that the one I already described would be a good example. And that was when the investors in China kept saying no. And I found out why. There might have been a dozen reasons, like our inexperience and all that. But one of the reasons was we weren't asking for enough. We were coming to them with, we would try to buy a $6 million apartment complex and we'd ask them for 2.5, and we'd be, borrowing, let's say 4, for 6.5 million total. And they were like, that's too small. And I'd be like, what? Wait, you want, yeah, we really don't want to write less than a $10 million check, or sometimes later 50 million, And it's like, I get it. And now that I'm in this seat as an investor as well, since we're investing in deals, I see why. It's not worth the due diligence, especially if you're in China, to write a $2 million check if you're trying to, place $1 billion in total investments, let's say. And so that was, that was part of the pivot, I guess, when we realized, hey, we can't expect some fairy tale godmother investor in China or India to give us a $10 million check. We've got to start going out and looking for 50 to 100,000 at a time. And that's what we did.
What was the largest single check you ever received?
Man, who would have thought when I got on the phone with a lobster fisherman from Maine that he would have, I could imagine that he had 50 or 100,000 to invest, but who would have imagined that he would give us a check for $1 million? But who would even more so imagine that his 21-year-old son would also throw in $1 million?
Now, did they do a handwritten check where they tear it out and they have the carbon copy on the back and they write, the 2 commas and a bunch of zeros and spell that out, or did they wire it to you?
I think they wired
it. Gotcha. They brought their bag full of seafood and dollar bills.
It'd be a fun story if they wrote the check and brought it to our office, but they were a little too busy. They only worked 5 months a year. Can you believe that?
That's awesome, man. There's money in the sea. So go back to when you wrote the Supernatural Business, right? Like it's a Bible plan on YouVersion.
Yeah, it's a Bible plan on YouVersion. Okay. YouVersion just crossed 1 billion subscribers. It's awesome. Quite a huge platform, and those guys are just doing awesome.
Yeah. So talk to us about why you wrote that.
Yeah, I wrote it for people like me who, are in business, but they felt a little inferior. I became a Christian about 36 years ago. And for the first several decades, I thought, oh, money, I'm just making money, but they're out there doing something important. If I could only maybe someday be a missionary or even an assistant pastor, or even, if I could just work at a church, I would be so much more godly and happier. And I was so wrong. And I wanted people to know that, you're not inferior if you're a business person at all. There are so many ways you can influence culture. And somebody came up with the concept that, Josh, I know you're aware of, the 7 mountains. And the 7 mountains basically say that there are 7 mountains of culture, 7 spheres of influence in culture. And those are media, education, government, which includes law, the arts, which includes entertainment and sports, family, religion, and business. And business includes, let's say, science, technology, medicine. And so these 7 spheres, God wants to be Lord of all those spheres. The Lord wants to actually, help us bring heaven to earth, if you will, in all those spheres. So if there's not something in heaven, it shouldn't be on earth. If there's no unemployment, there's no bad product defects, there's no bad bosses or bad employees in heaven. So let's pray and bring those things to earth as well, because Jesus said on earth as it is in heaven. And, Josh, there are people who don't seem to have a relationship with God who have taken this concept maybe further than we had. Now, God started out as a creator. Genesis 1:1, God created heavens and the earth. And so we're made in his image. People like Bill Gates or, Elon Musk, as far as I know, they don't have a relationship with God. And I'm not dissing them. It's just that there's no evidence. There's little evidence that Elon might be thinking about it, actually. But anyway, let's say Bill Gates. Okay, we have 4 times his potential, Josh. Why do we have 4 times his potential? Number one, he was made in God's image, and he has maximized that. But so were we. So were you and I. Number 2, we have the mind of Christ. As far as I know, he doesn't. Number 3, we have God within us, the Holy Spirit. As far as I know, he doesn't. And number 4, we have Christ in us, the hope of glory. Now, I'm being a little silly, but we have 4 things. Bill Gates has 1. He's done really well with that 1. Why don't we expect God to speak to us? Why don't we expect God to speak to us when we are sitting in a traffic jam in LA and we come up with a whole plan in our mind, like Elon Musk, to bore tunnels under the city of LA to actually fix the traffic jam problem? We've been given absolute access to God, the mind of God. We've been given access to supernatural answers that answer the world's worst problems and come up with solutions to the world's worst mess. And I tell you, Matt McPherson believed that God would answer. Have you heard of Matt?
What's his platform?
You might have heard of him. I bet you have. Can I tell this story?
Yeah, of course.
Matt McPherson was a frustrated worship leader and evangelist. He would go out on weekends and he would spend, like, he had 5 kids. He would pour his heart out and he would get like $28 in the offering. Well, he was also a bow hunter. He was also a tinkerer. He liked to tinker with things. He might have been an engineer or something. Anyway, he was trying to build a better compound bow. Now, those of you who are bow hunters know that the compound bow was invented in the 1960s, but it never worked perfect. For years and years, it would like fire a little bit off to the left or right or high. And the reason is they had 2 cams that had to be perfectly synced. Well, he was trying to work out a way to sync those 2 cams better. One day, he thought he heard God whisper in his ear, metaphorically at least, "I've got the best answers for every problem on earth. People just don't ask me." So Matt McPherson, sounds a little snarky to me, he said, "Okay, God, if you've got the best answers for every problem on earth, would you help me build a better bow, a better compound bow?" Well, about 2 weeks later, Matt reports that he woke up in the middle of the night and in front of his face was floating a piece of notebook paper. It had the torn side, the 3 holes in it, lines, but on this was drawn a schematic of a completely different kind of compound bow. And so he woke up and he started copying the schematic down. His wife rolls over and said, what are you doing? He said, "I think I'm having a vision." Anyway, he goes on to build this amazing compound bow. Now, Honda sells a whole lot of cars and makes a small profit per car. Mercedes-Benz, let's use a bigger one. Bentley makes a very tiny number of cars and makes a huge profit per car. Matt's company, Matthews Bows, makes the most bows of any manufacturer in the world and makes the highest profit per bow. And that's Matt McPherson's company. He's got dozens of patents, and he still walks around the mall in Oshkosh, Wisconsin today doing evangelism in his spare time. Matt has impacted the world. He has impacted a lot of people's lives. And for those of you who are into music, he's also invented a completely different kind of acoustic guitar that, most great guitars cost, a couple $1,000s, like a Martin guitar or Taylor. His start at like $7,000. And if you ever play one, you'll know it's worth it.
You're a captivating storyteller. Has anybody ever told you that?
No, my wife doesn't even know that.
I forgot we were recording. I was like, oh man, that's really cool. And I was like, oh wait, I got to go back and ask some questions. So Paul, you're very open about your faith and business and, talking about Jesus. Like, has that ever backfired on you when it comes to investors or investments or deal flow or business? Like, talk to us about that.
Here's the funny thing about that. My first real estate book was written in 2008. And then the last 7 or 8 pages are in your face presentation of the gospel. I mean, it was hell and everything. It's right there. And I've always thought, so I right after that book came out, I got an investor who joined me in a deal, and I ended up making I think it was $320,000 from that deal. And so I thought, that paid for all that effort writing the book. And then I've gotten dozens and dozens and dozens of other investors or clients who came in, and many of them said, well, I love the fact that you wrote the book on Smith Mountain Lake real estate. That was that 2008 book. But I also love that you shared your faith so boldly. Okay. But here's what I don't know. I don't know how many people were disgusted by it, hated it, and said, I'll never call them. I'll never do business with them. I just don't know. And so, no, I can't remember ever having anybody openly upset about that, that I can recall.
Yeah. So it sounds like you mentioned the 4 kind of competitive advantages of being a Christian and doing supernatural business, right? There's 4 competitive advantages for being a Christian through your, supernatural lens that you look at things. In those, like, how do you think that helps you as an investor or as a business owner or as a business leader?
Yeah. So, I mean, we all talk about integrity and integrity. The sense of the word I'm using it is that everything will be consistent, that I will be using the same types of metrics to make a decision for my family as I would for my company. I'm going to be leaning on God's wisdom as I apologize to my wife for yelling at her. I'd never do that. No,
I do. I don't mean to.
I yelled at her on Christmas Eve and I had to apologize.
Yeah.
But I used that same standard when I apologized to my investors and took all the blame for an investment that went bad a number of years ago. And so I really believe that, integrity means I'm going to be the same at home and at work and everywhere else, I hope. And so that's definitely one way. Another way is wisdom. And I don't think I barely tapped into this, but if I have a real problem, I was journaling this morning about a little problem I was having with a relationship that had nothing to do with work. And hopefully I'll use that same kind of tap into God's wisdom and journal and ask him for a solution at work just the same.
So as you're building your Wellings Capital, right? Where did you come up with the name Wellings Capital?
Man, that's a terrible story. And you asked me if you shouldn't ask anything. There you go. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, we had a really awkward name back in 2014, 15. We had a guy join our group as a partner. He's since moved on. I bought him out a couple of years ago because he was involved in this huge tech startup and he was busy. Anyway, he said, yeah, let's get a name generator. So that like the 99 designs where you can get graphic design and pay them, like 99 different entries and they do a contest. Well, we did a naming contest and we had all these criteria and Wellings Capital fit all of them. The problem is it doesn't mean that much, but the bigger problem is it gets confused all the time as Wellington Capital. In fact, even our investors and my business partner's dad call it Wellington Capital sometimes.
Yeah. That's interesting right there. All right. So
if I had to do over, I'd call it Wilberforce Capital. And I'll tell you why later before we end.
Okay. Don't let me forget that then.
You wouldn't forget.
I'm a human. All right. So as you're building this, right, you said you're about to go, you're about to go for a big fund. What does that look like?
Yeah. So we have investors who say, I would love to have liquidity options. I don't plan to cash out for the full 10 years, but what if I need the money? We have other investors who say, hey, I got in January 1st and someone else paid the same price to get in December 31st, 12 months later. Why isn't that price going up? And why isn't there a, net asset value calculation? We have investors who would love to reinvest their profits every month. In other words, they let's say they're getting a distribution check for 5,000 a month, they say, I don't really need the money to live on. I'd rather just plow it back in and let it grow, sort of like Berkshire Hathaway, does, continues to allow their assets to grow and compound. Well, this fund allows all those features and more. And so we'll be launching that. It'll be open to accredited investors, hopefully April 1st, 2022. And will be open to accredited investors with a $50,000 minimum.
Cool. Very cool. Let's talk about investor relations, right? So, out of all the funds you've done, you've raised 80 million bucks. You're going to do a much bigger one. Like, how many investors, if you had to kind of take a guess of how many investors you're managing within each fund?
Oh, within each fund? Well, how about let's start with about 475 total.
Okay.
And we have 100 investors by SEC regulation. For our last two funds, we have a max of 100 investors each. Our $30 million fund, however, had about 350 or so investors, with the average in the $80,000 or $90,000 range.
All right. Talk to me about the difference from managing, in terms of investor relations, IR, managing 100 investor fund versus a 370 whatever investor fund.
I haven't seen any difference at all, really. We have systems. I have a business partner. You're probably familiar with Gino Wickman and EOS and Traction and all that.
Yeah.
And my business partner, one of the really, really experienced people in EOS, came to to do an implementation with our business. And he said, he thinks my partner is possibly the very best implementer integrator of the 700 people he has worked with. And so he's extremely organized. And so it's frightening. Anyway, he makes everything into a system. And so it doesn't feel any different to me.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I love EOS. I've read all of Gino's books. His recent one, EOS Life, I think is incredible. Yeah. He has some personal questions in business. Yeah. I recommend that book. And then the group that, is building and scaling out, my friend David Mann, and he's building and growing that out. But it's great for all you listeners. Check out EOS if you're building and scaling a business. It's really phenomenal.
It really is. And if you want Gino on your podcast, just say the word. He and I were friends in Detroit 25 years ago.
Yeah, let's get him. I would love to chat with him and
let me know.
Give him a high five. Yes, I do. I'm calling you out on it. I want to chat with Gino.
Okay.
So let me ask you this question, right? So one of the first books that they kind of collaborated on, him and Frank wrote a book called Rocket Fuel.
Rocket Fuel, yeah.
Yep. And in the book, it talks about visionary integrator, right? Your partner's integrator. Yeah. How do you, where do you fit in that? Are you a high visionary or a little bit of both?
Can I, if I could just turn my camera and show you my office and the stacks of books and the mail and the books like sitting sideways, you would definitely know that I'm the visionary.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. So then with that, what is your superpower in the business and in the business partnership?
Yeah, it's definitely relating to people. And it can get me in trouble sometimes when I have an hour-long conversation and Ben says, was that an investor? No, it was just a kid I wanted to help. Well, okay. Anyway, so he tolerates it, but no, it's definitely dealing with people. It's also for sure creating content, and specifically, I would say writing first, and podcasting and doing videos second.
Got it. When you write, do you like pen and paper? Do you like to type something out on a keyboard? Do you like to use a tool or a software? Like, how do you write?
Yeah, I was trained by a very famous, expensive copywriter in 2000. In 2008, 9, 10, I got kind of depressed with the real estate business. So I actually took some time to do copywriting while I was doing real estate to pay the bills. And I got trained by this guy, and it was all pen and paper. And he said it was really important for your brain, but I just can't pull it off. I'm writing everything with a typewritten now with my computer. And I think it's honestly, I don't see a difference.
Yeah. Are you a Mac or PC kind of guy?
Mac.
Yeah. Okay. What about your phone, Apple or Android?
Apple for now, but I just watched a video about the new Tesla phone that they expect to come out within a year. And I'm Elon Musk, man. I actually dissed him at a conference I spoke at in Orlando recently. I just made a passing comment. Man, I listened to his interview with the Babylon Bee the other day. He's an impressive, well, not only is he impressive, everybody knows that, but I really, really like him. And I really personally, I mean, he is such a sweet guy, and he is making huge contributions to society in mostly good ways. And I don't know. I think I might buy the Tesla phone someday.
There you go. All right. So me, you, Elon, we're having a cup of coffee, hanging out, and he leans over and asks you a question. What do you think he would ask you?
I have no idea. I don't know.
What would
I
you
don't know
want him to
well
ask you?
I think I want him to ask me about the way I treated the person at the front door when I held the door for him, the way I was interested in the server, the way I gave the barista a $2 bill and asked if I could pray for them, and just how I generally, how I carried myself with joy.
Very cool. What would you ask him?
Man, I would ask him, like his mom said at 3 years old, he was already just so full of ideas and solutions and coming up with stuff. I would just ask him if he's done anything in particular to tap into the creative genius that God gave him. And I think I'd point out to him that his creativity is just a gift from God that he has maximized more than any human I have ever heard of.
That's pretty cool. If I picked up your phone right now, and let's just say you got the Tesla phone, right? Self-driving phone or whatever, self-dialing, it just thinks what you're thinking and dials someone, right? But let's just say I picked up that phone and I went through your song playlist. What's your number one song that you would have on that playlist on the Tesla phone?
You stumped me, man. I don't know. I'm actually a musician. I love music.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer for you. I love all kinds of different music, a lot of classic 80s rock, but also, a lot of the Bethel and Hillsong and elevation worship stuff. And you completely stumped me.
Oh, that's good. Every time I stump someone, I should get them to donate to my donor advised fund, and we give it to like police, fire, veterans and such like that. So that's going to be something that I might carry on in the future.
I think you should.
All right. Sounds good. You could be my first donor donation to that. So as you're doing music, right? What instrument do you play, by the way?
I know how to play guitar, but I play bass mainly.
Oh, really? My wife plays bass.
Yeah.
Are you righty or lefty?
I'm right.
Okay. Got it. And
you asked because she's a lefty, I'm guessing.
No, because we looked at a bunch of different bass guitars. She played for our church when we were in Orlando, and up to the point where she was like 8 months pregnant playing bass, and her belly was sticking out. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, but we bought her a micro bass. So it was the size of an electric guitar. It was a 4-string bass, and it sounded great, man. Yeah. So I bought a few bass guitars, so that's the only way I know about bass. What kind of music do you like to play?
My buddy and I, he comes over for from New Year's Eve for 3 or 4 days, and we play all kinds of classic rock stuff. Like he really likes to play, Pink Floyd or Zeppelin or Def Leppard type stuff. And it's not necessarily all the stuff I love to listen to anymore. But I've played in a number of worship bands over the years, and have really enjoyed playing, especially stuff like Bethel, Hillsong, Elevation, etc.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Now, as you're playing music, how do you think that connects in with what you're doing on the business side? Is there any connection as you're learning and playing music and jamming with other people? Do you see any correlations on both sides of the business?
Yeah, one thing So I was on Bigger Pockets the other day and somebody was asking me about, or not asking me, but on a forum post asking, hey, I'm going to go into commercial real estate. I've been a sole proprietor flipper. Do I need a team? And the answer from me, especially, but everybody that answered was yes, you definitely need a team. So I think that's the same with music. I mean, imagine a bass can be pretty boring, or drums can even be more boring. I think if you're just playing by yourself, it's way more fun to have a team of skilled musicians around you. And it's the same with us. And that's one of the reasons Wellings Capital, I mean, so Warren Buffett has one of the largest companies in America. He only has 28 employees.
Wow.
At their headquarters there. And Wellings Capital, people ask us, well, tell me about your team. It's very, very small. We have like 6 employees, you know, and that's it. And because we team with people who have the big property management, asset management, CFOs, all that type of stuff, you know, they have those teams with hundreds of employees.
Yeah. All right. Here's what I like, as we're getting to know each other and our audience is getting to know you, like the purpose of the show, the mission and purpose of the show is so people can get to know the story of the deal maker, to know, like, and trust them, and then to put deals and deal makers together. So people are listening and go like, I really like Paul and I want to do a deal with him, maybe invest in his fund, maybe sell him an asset, whatever the case may be. But a part of this is I have a deck of cards that have questions that I have no clue which one you're gonna pick, but I like to ask it because sometimes they're like, it creates a really cool conversation. So tell me when to stop.
Stop.
All right, this is gonna be. Sometimes I get really nervous as I go through this because I'm like,
you think you're nervous?
Yeah. Who knows what's gonna be on this? Okay, so what's something about your life right now that you would miss when you're 80?
Oh man. So I want to say windsurfing, but I'm not doing that. Windsurfing is like one of the hardest sports imaginable, but I'm not doing it anymore for that reason. I would guess, having kids that still live at my house,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to have grandkids or great grandkids, but I mean, having kids, I mean, my son and I are actually going to sit down tonight, and I'm so proud of him. He's made a lot of money this year, and before the year end, he wants to write a bunch of checks to nonprofits and mission, organizations, before before the end of the year. And so we'll be doing that together, and I'm really excited about that.
Oh, that's so awesome, man. Proud dad right there, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So now let's flip that question, and we're hanging out and you're 80 and I come visit you and we're sitting on the front porch drinking a coffee or a cocktail or something. And we're looking back and we go, man, we did it. Right. What does winning look like? So you're 80 and we're sitting there on the rocking chair, having fun, having a good conversation. And you look back and you say, I accomplished this one thing.
Yeah.
What is that one thing for you?
Well, there's a bunch of one things, but I'll tell you this one. I mentioned earlier that I wish we'd have named our company Wilberforce Capital, which I own that name, by the way. But it's just so hard to rebrand right now, especially since I've been on, hundreds of podcasts and all that. But did you know that if you took the record profits, not the average, the record profits of Apple, General Motors, Nike, and Starbucks, added those together, doubled that number, you would come up with the approximate annual profits from human trafficking in the world right now? And this is a huge thing. And, I like to believe, Josh, if I was alive in the 1800s, I would have been an abolitionist fighting against slavery. I'd like to believe if I was an adult in the 1960s, I would have been fighting for righteous civil rights. Well, this is a civil right. It is slavery. And the lives of tens of millions of people have been ripped away from them. In fact, since we started this show, several hundred people have been captured or sold into human trafficking. And this is a worldwide, international disgrace. There's more slaves in the world now than any time in human history. And so Wellings Capital has made a goal to raise $5 million to give to fight human trafficking and rescue its victims in the next 5 years. And so I would like to be able to say that through promotion and getting the word out there, and through, raising capital, through encouraging other people to give and other people to go on trips and support these organizations, that we made a meaningful dent for millions of people in this great evil.
Why is that important to you?
I had a wife and a daughter who were both the victims of 1 or 2 or 3 time bad events. Let's say it that way. And those bad events at a young age scarred them so deeply. I can't imagine I can't imagine if it was my daughter or your daughter who was sold into, sex slavery, where they were having to perform 20 or more times a day, 365 days a year.
Oh, geez.
The toll is unimaginable on one human being. And, saving one person, as Mother Teresa said, to them, it means everything, even if we can't save the whole world.
Wow. Well, then let's go after that goal, right? Let's get there before you're 80 and let's knock down 5 million. That's, we can make that happen.
Yeah.
With our powers combined, I think we could do that.
So yeah,
So
let's do it.
So Paul, give us an idea of where people could connect and maybe read about your supernatural business side of the world.
Yeah. So if they want to go on YouVersion, you go into the Bible plans, you can type in doing business supernaturally, and you can go through our Bible plan there. If they want to learn more about commercial real estate, how to get involved in self-storage, mobile home parks, etc., we've got some free resources on our website. The website is Wellings Capital, WELLINGS, wellingscapital.com. We also have a free course on how to invest in commercial real estate, which was a real problem for me for years, trying to figure out how do I get in. And that free course is at wellingscapital.com/resources. They can also get my new book called Storing Up Profits on Amazon or BiggerPockets.
Very cool. Why did you mention this? The Wilberforce? Why the name?
I didn't.
Why don't you tell
William Wilberforce is one of the most amazing human beings in world history. He's not well known right now, sadly, but he lived from 1770 to 1832 or so. And he actually almost single-handedly turned the entire tide of England and the Western world against slavery. What's amazing about him is the Civil War in the US was one of the resulting things that happened as a result of his efforts. He prayed, he raised money, he raised awareness. He would not back down in Congress. In the House of Lords there in England, he refused to back down, and he persevered in this from the year he became a Christian in, I believe it was 1792 or 3, till he retired from, the House of Lords in, like 30 years later. He just would not back down, and his perseverance is amazing. So William Wilberforce is definitely a man to be celebrated. If you want to learn more, you can hear about him in the great movie and the book by the same title, Amazing Grace.
Very cool. Paul, you mentioned a few places where people could go to connect with you. What does the perfect deal look like for you?
Well, the perfect deal starts with the perfect operator. Warren Buffett he got a phone call from Tom Murphy in 1979, and in 15 minutes, Tom Murphy convinced Buffett to invest a whole bunch of money for Murphy to, in his tiny little company, to buy CBS. Capital Cities bought CBS, and they made a huge amount of money on it over the years and then sold it to, I believe it was Disney in 1996. But Buffett made that decision quickly because he trusted Murphy. And for us, trusting these operators that we've spent a lot of time vetting leads to the perfect deal. The opportunity for us to get to know these people, to vet them, to check their track record, their team, their history, getting to know them is the first step in finding that perfect deal. And then hopefully they'll have, and one of the things we vet is that they have a very robust acquisition pipeline going out to find value add deals with hidden intrinsic value.
So you've mentioned where people could go to connect with you for, if they have the perfect operator, perfect deal, perfect acquisition, pipeline. Say that one more time. What's a good place to connect with you on that specific deal?
On that specific deal? Well, wellingscapital.com. They can just come there and just fill out an information card there. Did I say card? Anyway, they can fill out a form to learn more about connecting with us, and they can, or they can email us, at investments@wellingscapital.com.
I knew what you were going for. You were going to say, fill out that contact card on the back of the chair, drop it in the offering bucket.
That's right, man.
Very cool. All right. So Paul, what question should I have asked you in this that I screwed up and didn't ask you?
Yeah. I think you did it. I think you did a great job. I can't imagine much. I mean, you could have asked about my kids. You could have asked for one more story, amazing God story in business. How about that?
How about a supernatural business story? And we'll end with that.
There was a guy who was a furniture repairman, and he would strip all the old varnish or whatever it's called off wood furniture, and then he would sand it, and then he would refinish it. But he found out that those chemicals were really, really bad for his health. They were toxic. And he thought, I really don't think I'll stay in this business unless I can find an all natural organic furniture stripping solution that's just as good as the regular toxic kind. And so he looked, he couldn't find any. So he started toying around in his garage, like a little lab he had, to try to make his own furniture polish. Well, he wasn't getting anywhere. His wife was pregnant, and he took her lunch like a good husband that he was. And when he took the lunch into her bedroom, she woke up and she said, "Hey, does this mean anything to you?" And she rattled off a series of letters and numbers. And he said, "Well, it sounds like a chemical formula." And he said, "Do you remember it really?" She said, "Yeah, here it is again." And he wrote it down. He went to his little lab and he combined it, and it turned out to be the perfect furniture stripper, all organic, all natural, and it worked as well as any of the toxic kind. So he actually began using that. Then he began selling it through some hardware stores in Michigan. And then it eventually went nationwide. His company was acquired, and now his wife and he go around America in their really nice RV doing evangelism and other types of things like that. God spoke to them and gave them the secret, just like Matt McPherson, that they were asking for.
And what was the name of their product?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I heard this story about 6 years ago from a very, very reliable source who apparently knew, but I don't know.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, thank you for coming on the show, sharing your story, sharing your faith, being so bold about your belief systems. I believe that our belief systems help dictate our identity and then help dictate our actions and the way we show up to the world. So thank you for showing up. I appreciate that. Fellow deal makers in the audience, as always, reach out to our guests, say thank you for being on the show, find a way to connect with them, find a way to do a deal with them. That course on how to be a real estate investor sounds pretty cool. It's a free course. So all those links will be in the show note. Maybe check that out if you're looking to become a real estate investor yourself. If you're working on a deal, looking for a deal, or want to talk about the deal here on the Deal Scout, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show next. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. Cheers.